Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Jenny Dilts. She is a grieving coach and she's based in California. She's here to share some of her insights of what she learned on what we can do. We're going to focus on this, what we can do to make our vulnerability and imperfections our superpower. Hi, Jenny. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to talk about this because often people see grief as something to be pushed away. They don't want to go to the messy, complicated, unpleasant feelings that often come when we grieve. Um, in my work, personally and professionally, I've found that it's actually a strength to look at the messy um,
Right.
and uh, and look how you can turn that into a strength, not only for yourself but also in serving and connecting with others.
Right. That's true. And I think it's so important, especially while we in our throughout our life, we have to deal with a lot of changes. And so we grieving is can be affected by certain things, right? Not just death or an illness, but that's how I look at it.
Exactly, yeah. My definition of grief is the natural reaction to loss.
Ah, right. A loss could be a job, it could be cancer. And I'm telling you, I shouldn't I had one of those years in 2014.
Yeah.
Meaning I had a corporate job. I'm just blabbing here, but Um, and then we had a private equity firm buy out, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and I was one of them. But then 2 months later, I was having to deal with that, and then 2 months later, I had cancer again.
Wow.
Oh, I'm like, okay. So it was, but I think it was support from family and friends and some of my clients that help. And I think one of the things that people they try to grieve, this is my personal experience, try to do things alone too.
Hmm. And that's one of the beauties that connection has,
Yeah.
and vulnerability leads to connection, because when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and share our imperfections, it gives other people permission to do the same.
It
And
right, it shows them that they're not abnormal. Is that the right word? They're
mhm,
normal, I should
yeah,
say.
yeah, it gives a sense of common humanity.
I like that.
I'm human, you're human, we're all human, let's be human together.
Right, and I think we're all important as well.
Hmm.
We all have some kinda value, that we can add to others as well, and I think what you're doing is very, very helpful. You had mentioned earlier that you had a lot of kids, and so that, you said 5 kids? So
Yeah, I
that's
have
a
5 kids.
challenge, but especially what's going on with COVID in California's got hit quite pretty hard, right?
Yeah, we're back to the most restrictive
Oh, wow.
um, precautions or
Right, and I think that's the right thing to do as well, especially because you have kids. But so that does that affect, I'm assuming now you're doing a lot of your grieving, your coaching on Zoom calls because of
hmm.
this?
Yeah, yeah. I have been anyways.
Oh, that's
Um,
good.
so it's not a huge switch for me. And I also work with clients internationally.
Oh,
So Zoom allows me to do that. And online coaching allows me to um, reach places that I wouldn't be otherwise able to geographically.
right. So I'm assuming I've learned that when I'm connecting with others in a group, do you do any like group calls too? Or is it just
I do group calls sometimes too. Um, I've been really active in the Reimagine community. Reimagine is an organization um, that encourages people to talk about heavy topics like um, grief and death, racial injustice,
right?
um, political unrest. Um, and it allows us, it's a space that we can come to talk about our vulnerabilities, talk about the things that aren't going well, talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about, and and build a community
I like
of
that.
people who want to
Right. I think that's what has affected. I'm sure you're probably been busy because of this COVID and people being isolated in a way that's probably affected their grieving. If especially if they have a family member that did die during 2020,
Yeah,
a lot of funerals weren't being held, right? And
exactly.
that's that's hard, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is.
It is I'm just it's just I'm so glad 2020 is gone, and I try to focus on the positive, and thankfully I haven't had to personally deal with that. I mean, I did have someone like my sister-in-law's father passed away, but they couldn't do anything. Because
Right.
what happened was he had fallen and broken his hip, and he was living at home, but he had some help. So they put him in a rehab facility. Well, and he got sick in the rehab facility.
Oh no.
And I'm not 100% sure. They never said it was COVID, but he ended up had to be on a ventilator, and it's this was so that's what's so sad. But I think we all have to deal with it. Just our country, everybody has to deal with what's going on, and we have to be respectful of it. And I think we need
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you to point out what you're doing is important. We are all of us are not perfect. That was one of my issues I thought in the past. I was
Mm-hmm.
perfect, and or I didn't want to do something unless it was perfect. That's better, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so people hold themselves back. And I guess another question I have for you is what brought you down this path? What made you want to help people? I'm assuming you have a backstory of why you wanted to do this.
Um, I do, but interestingly, I don't have experience with death that has affected me in my everyday
Gotcha.
routines.
Okay.
I've always had a positive attitude about death. I've always seen death as a necessary part of life,
Right.
a transition into the next stage.
That's
Um,
great perspective.
so that's one thing that's always been part of me. And then 3 years ago, I was able, oh, almost 4 years ago now, I was able to sit with a friend whose husband died suddenly. And in that time that I was sitting with her, I understood that I had gifts to hold people in that space of trauma and grief and confusion and vulnerability, where not very many people are apt to or have a tendency to go. And as I sat with her, I saw my own gifts in holding that sacred space for her. And I began to help others do the same.
I think that's really good. And that's to me, I like that you discovered that that's a strength you have too, not just it's a gift and a strength. You're supporting others, and we need people to focus on that. I think more of that, and not. I'm sure you've had in the past people tell you what you should do, not what you want to do, right?
Definitely. That's been my whole life up until about 6 years. And 6 years ago, I've lived on what other people's expectations for me have been. Um, but 6 years ago, I had some mental health challenges.
Right.
Um, well, I describe them, I like to refer to them as um, mental opportunities or experiences, because I don't see it as a bad thing. Um, but I had some experiences that um, that taught me to question, why am I doing this? Why? Who am I? And why? What do I want? Um, Looking at my internal motivations, my internal desires, rather than what other people are expecting from me.
Right. I like that because I've had that. In the past too. I was told what I had to do, and I think maybe that's the. I'm not a rebel, but I'm a little. I like being independent, maybe because of that.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yeah.
When,
Yeah, I do.
when I was younger, and I did a lot of things that were outside of the box, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good thing. And hopefully you can't hear my dogs barking upstairs. Sorry, they're
It's okay. It's right on par with my husband burping and my kids chattering. So it's all
right.
good.
Everybody that we're recording, I'm in my basement. My dogs are upstairs, and I think they're something got them excited. Sorry. Anyway, but that's part of life, right? That's real things living, and I don't judge people based on that. I think it's great. To me, I'm like you. Try to look at the positive in a situation or the good out of something
Mm-hmm.
that helps you deal probably deal through grief. Is that the word? And it's all good. Um, and so your kids, I'm sure that dealing with the school stuff is going to be is hard because you have. I don't know how many are in school yet. Are they all in?
All of them are in
Oh
school.
wow, sorry. I think you guys. I think parents with younger kids like that and still in school have it the hardest during COVID, just because of um, it's just a different transition, a change for everybody involved, and it's harder for them. And you're being a good role model, obviously, being able to help them work at home. It helps.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was homeschooling for about 3 years. Um, and in November of 2019, I decided, okay, I'm done homeschooling now. So I had put all of my kids into public school. They were in public school before I was homeschooling.
Okay.
So I put them back into public school in November. And then in March, they were home again.
Well, so you're experienced at it. So it wasn't like you had to start from scratch. So that's good.
Yeah. And I was experienced also to know that, okay, homeschooling is not for me.
I did 1 year of homeschooling for my younger, well, when he was in like 7th grade. He was a hockey player and he traveled a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We were on the, I mean, he was a good hockey player. He was on the road a lot, and he asked me to be homeschooled for 7th grade, um, and I said why, and he said because girls are distractions. Is what he told me. And but then at the same time, he missed a lot of school sometimes, so we had to get permission and make up work all the time. But we did it for a year. It was through the Georgia Virtual Academy, is what it's called. So it was through this. It was still part of the state. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But he realized after a year, like, oh, I'm wearing my mom too much. But he learned that, I would rather be around other people. That's what he learned. And even though he was with his hockey buddies, it's different. I think being in a group or a community of people his age.
Yeah.
And he learned from that. And I learned too, like you, I'm like, I was trying to help him. He wanted to do hockey, and that was the right thing to do. But at the time, I thought it was. But we bonded, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you bonded really well with your children, which is a good. I think you're being a good role model. I really think that they see that mom is focusing on her gifts and her strengths and helping others. You probably don't realize how much they see it, right?
Yeah, I think being mom is like watching the grass grow
Yeah.
because it's constant and the change is so slight, and every day is the same thing. You have the same view every day. So sometimes for me, it's hard to see how much growth is really taking place
Right.
in the home.
Right. Until you look back a few years later, a picture. That's why I love to take pictures. And that's why I'm like, I started doing the podcast because it was connecting me to others. And it was very helpful during 2020, Zooming and things like that. Because I started podcasting, or I was a guest on podcast, excuse me, previously, promoting a book that I had. And I'm like, I really like this. And I'm helping others as well in my way. I'm not, but because I want to focus on, we're all dealing with something. That's how I call it. And that's why it's called Real Things Living. And it's how we support each other And that's kind of how I got started. And it was my kids actually who taught me to be more vulnerable. Does that make sense? My
That's
own.
awesome. Yeah.
Right, because I'm one that from that generation, like you don't tell anybody, you suppress everything.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure, you're obviously younger than me because you have kids that are in school, but mine are like out of college now. But it's just amazing how we just need to be open to change, and that's just part of life. And grief, like you said, you're losing something like a death or whatever, or a job that I mentioned is part of life and a loss, and you gotta take it in and let it out.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm blabbing so much, but I like your calmness and your perspective. And do you have any like you said, the Reimagine community? Is that like a subscription kind of thing, or I didn't know what it was?
No, it's a nonprofit organization,
Okay.
and they hold events. Sometimes they hold festivals. In 2020, it was virtual,
Okay.
um, obviously, um, and they make space for other people to come in and present workshops or activities or events, um, to build community and build opportunities for connection.
Right.
Um, their website is letsreimagine.org.
Let's Reimagine. Okay.
Let's
I'm gonna
reimagine,
check it
yeah.
out later. It just sounds like a very positive platform,
Hmm.
and I think that's what we definitely need more of. And it's people who are looking for connecting like that. That's my whole thing, right? That is
Yeah.
we're all dealing with something. Let's connect. Let's come up with some ideas and solutions to help us. And I think that's what you're doing as well. But you're doing it more one on one and actually helping people dig a little bit deeper.
I do one-on-one, and I also do a lot of connecting, um, on a more public scale too.
That's cool.
So besides my work with Reimagine, I am in a group of life coaches, primarily life coaches, building networks there, and helping each other stand stronger for ourselves and also for our clients. Um, I'm working with another grief worker to make workshops specifically for healthcare workers,
Oh yeah.
um, to handle the stress and grief of their jobs. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so I'm connecting there. Um, mentoring other grief and end of life coaches. Um, connection is the definition of life for me.
I like that. I like that definition. I think and it's so true. Just like right with writers, they need a support group, and I'm sure what you do, you definitely need support from other life coaches and grief coaches, because I'm sure you
Hmm.
hear some traumatic things as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm glad you brought up the healthcare workers, because I think maybe that is probably number one compared to the parents with kids at home, because they see a lot of stuff, and that takes a lot of time, and I'm sure they deal with a lot of trauma and
Yeah.
fatigue
Yeah.
and overwhelm, especially now with what's happening.
Hmm.
And I think that's really good that you're helping. I mean, in any way, shape, or form. That's find your strength, and I think that's what you're an example of.
Yeah, it's interesting with my experience 3 years ago, 4 years ago, with my friend. I didn't realize that that was a gift for me.
Right.
Um, I've always, I guess I've always been like a support person,
Me too.
but yeah, but I've always been like the support person that's under the bridge.
Gotcha.
But with the experience of my friend, as I started telling people about that experience, and as I started to own this passion to help others and support others in grief, I started to embrace more of my bridgeness, and come out of hiding. I started to embrace that I'm not only the support beams underneath the bridge, but I'm also the framework of the bridge also.
Okay. I like your analogies or the definitions you're giving. I'm writing this down. Framework of the bridge. I like that. And so when you, I'm assuming I looked at your website and you have a whole list of resources on there, or is that word, a page of resources?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the most important one that's on there? I know that I'm kind of throwing you, but you have your grieving coach resources, and is it our books are mostly what people want, or videos, or you know what I'm saying? I'm just curious because you have a lot of great, I checked it out, guys. She has a lot of great stuff on there. And I just didn't know what Jenny took, what was had the most impact on her.
It's interesting that you point out the resources page, because I was actually thinking this morning that I need to redo my website. And I was actually thinking that I was going to ditch the resources page altogether.
But I was intrigued by it.
So now I don't know what to do with it. Real life.
You're welcome. Before I talk to people, I want to just,
right.
just get a little homework, do a little homework. And I'm like, I really like this stuff. Like there's one I saw, I didn't listen to it yet, but it's a TEDx talk about dying well. And I think I like that perspective too. He brought that up, I think, a little bit earlier in our conversation. That's, people need to look at where it's just part of life, right? I think I mentioned that something similar in my first book. It's dying as part of life. And while I'm here, right, I'm going to make best impact that I can. And people used to make fun of me, and well, not make fun of me, but saying that was like too nice. I'm like, why is that a bad thing? Right. Maybe because they probably didn't, they were jealous. I don't know if they're jealous, but for some reason, it bothered them that I was being nice. You don't want me to be mean. I'm just kidding. But I think also I'm competitive, but I don't look down on people. And that's just like I'm a runner, but I don't look down on other people. And I try to support, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I learned about myself after all these weird grief things I've gone through, right? You learn so much more about yourself.
Yeah. Going back to the resources page.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
As a coach, the most important resource is actually yourself.
I like that.
My clients are the experts in their lives.
Right.
They have all the answers that they need within themselves. So my role as a coach is to help them access those answers, to pull those answers out, and to help them connect more strongly and better with themselves.
That is the perfect summary. You definitely need to add that description on the top of your, seriously, what you just said, and you'll have a recording of this later, but I think it's really good. It is, do you recommend to your clients to like journal at all, write thoughts down?
I do.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on the clients.
Yeah.
Not every client
wants to
resonates with journaling.
Yeah.
Some want to talk it out. Some want to journal. Mm-hmm. Some want a mixture of both. Right. Some want group meetings.
Right.
So it just depends on each individual has their own personal journey. Each grief experience is unique. And grief affects us as individuals differently. The way grief comes to me is different than the way grief comes to you.
Right.
And with each specific loss, the grief experience may be different.
Correct. And it's not loss. When I think of the word grieving, I use it affiliated with death, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as I've aged, and it's more than just that, right? And it's just like you said, it's a natural loss of something that you've. It's part of change too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm saying it incorrectly, but I think we need more people like Jenny Dilts. I'm serious in this world because everybody's different. And I had mentioned previously, everybody is dealing with something, and we need to support each other in some shape or form. And mine is a mixture of talking like this and writing. And I've done speaking things, not past the past year, but more about wellness situations, And I think being in the work world, corporate world is, I should say, it's very stressful too.
Yeah.
I try to help people with, I've helped them on stress,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which probably can be amplified because of grief, because they're not releasing the grief or dealing with it.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah. 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 When we don't deal with our grief, when we don't give space for it and give expression to it, um, it can be like a pressure cooker.
Yeah,
And sometimes that, if enough pressure builds up, it's going to give somehow.
right. It'll pop. Is that the right
Mm-hmm.
word?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's I don't know. I worry a little bit, because you deal with it more about the younger generation, maybe. Um, does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? Because of I think technology kind of has had that's just me, a negative effect on certain things. I don't know if you agree with that, or not.
Yeah.
Zoom is not a negative thing. I don't think Zoom is. I just meant like social media, being addicted to that isn't helpful.
Um, I see benefits and cons,
Right,
pros and cons to it.
right.
Um, for me, it's been a fantastic thing to broaden my network and connect with people
Yeah.
all over the world. I'm also training with the crisis center, the local crisis center,
Hmm.
and they handle suicide prevention and um, the community resources and also a grief support program. So in part of my training and as I've been connecting with people who work with suicide, um, social media is a big factor
For
in
suicide thoughts.
youth suicide. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
Um, there can be a lot of comparison, a lot of I have to put on this perfect face. I have to meet all of these unrealistic, nebulous standards.
hmm
I have to always be on. I always have to be as good as somebody or better, or
comparing.
always checking my likes and
Yeah.
followers and
Yeah, I think that's why I brought that up, because social media. My older son, who's 25 now, he's had multiple friends. I mean, not friends, but people who went to high school with, they've committed suicide.
yeah, yeah,
In between high school and 24 years. Yeah, it's just, that's what it is. It is it um and they get involved in, because of that, they try to suppress what they're feeling with drugs usually. And I'm getting off on a tangent here, but that's kind of why I brought up social media. We need to make it, look at the good aspect of it. I like LinkedIn right now just because it's more
mm-hmm.
business connect, or should I say business, but work issues.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
and I too, I try not to focus too much on my likes, even though I do look at it sometimes. I'm just being honest, right? We all do,
mm-hmm.
but I don't
Yeah, yeah,
put a focus on that. And that's, we just need, I'm just trying to talk about that. And I had mentioned, I think earlier, that I used to be competitive, but I don't look down on people. And I think that's what social media is, more of it's like the negative aspect of being competitive, maybe.
yeah. Like you say, it has its good points too.
Right.
I think as long as we teach the younger generation and our kids and the youth,
Yes, we are models, right?
yeah, I think as long as we teach them to use it for positive,
Yeah.
positive purposes, to use it to connect with other people in positive ways, to check up on people
That's
in
true.
vulnerable and healthy ways,
I like that.
to be aware of people, to share inspiration with each other. I think it could be a very fantastic tool. And I also see, if it's not used in a healthy way, that it can have very detrimental effects, even
Yeah.
suicide.
Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with their environment, probably. And you know what I'm saying, what they're dealing with.
Mhm.
And it really, they're just suppressing things, are not getting the right support. And I find myself really lucky. I mean, if based on what I've dealt with, but that's because I had the right support and role models. I think that helped a lot.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I always try to look at the good in situation. I know things happen, bad things can happen, but then I try to okay, let's moving forward, what good can come out of this? That's kind of, is that the right way to look at it?
Yeah, that's exactly what one of the main things that I use in my grief coaching is, yes, this bad thing happened, this very painful thing happened. What can grief teach you?
Yes.
What can you learn from it? And how are you stronger and more broken because of it? How can this enable you to share your vulnerabilities and your weakness with others, so that they can support you, and so that you can support others in their weakness and in their challenges? And also, how can you find the positives? How are you stronger? How are you doing things that you thought were impossible? How are you better able to handle and cope? How are you more resilient because of your experiences?
I love this. That is perfect way to end this. So Jenny, where can people learn more about you?
My website is grievingcoach.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Jenny Dilts Grieving Coach, Jenny Dilts - Grieving Coach.
And I definitely want to keep in contact. I'm glad I brought up your resource page, because I really think I just think it's helpful, especially what you're involved in. People are always searching for different things for support. And I really appreciate what you're doing for everybody, because it's so important, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, it's a passion of mine, not only internally but externally, as we were talking about. I feel like the more that I embrace my passion, inside out, the more opportunities come to me to grow in the passion outside in.
That is a really great mindset. So that's for, I'm trying to come up with these words, but it's this first thing that comes to mind is the mindset that you have. Things will come when you think about them in the right way. And I really appreciate your time again. Everybody, please check out Jenny's website. I will have it in the summary description of the podcast episode. And hope you stay healthy and enjoy the rest of your day with your kids, Jenny.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye.